Ivan, thank you very much for joining our interview series. Let me start right away with the first question. How would you interpret Javier Milei's midterm victory in light of Argentina's ongoing economic downturn, corruption scandals, and record low voter turnout? What does this outcome reveal about the contemporary resonance and adaptability of right-wing populist discourse within context of socioeconomic precarity and institutional distrust?
Well, it's a very complex issue. There are many things interconnected, but I think first of all, one has to interpret this victory in the context of the Argentine economic and political situation and of the dynamics of the last decade, more or less, so to speak. So first of all, there is an ongoing strong division in Argentine society in terms of economic and political projects. And on the one hand, we have Peronism and Kirchnerism as a particular and dominant current within Peronism. And on the other hand, we have a more market-oriented, right-wing oriented approach, which focuses on control austerity policies, favoring market mechanisms, insertion of Argentine economy in the world, less protectionism, and so on. So this is the structure, the structural basis of Argentine politics of the last decade, at the least. And then you have also the current economic situation. So all the problems you mentioned are very acute, are very important. In fact, they led also to the defeat of Milei's party in the Buenos Aires elections a few weeks ago. But on the other hand, there is also fear among, in particular, these sectors that endorse a more liberal economic project. There was fear that the defeat of Milei would entail economic collapse, devaluation, even a very uncertain political scenario that would lead even to the demotion of Milei. So that helps explain the solidification of the coalition in favor of Milei. It's 40% of the vote. It's 40% of 68% of the people who voted. So of Argentine people. So it's probably about less than 30% of the voters. It's like of the people, like 29% of the people, 29% of the Argentine society. It's a majority of votes. But these are the basics. There are more elements. That doesn't mean, by the way, that everybody in this coalition is happy about Milei or likes Milei or trusts Milei or something like that. But they may have preferred the continuation of this project to the uncertainties of a defeat by Milei. So these are the basic elements in my view.
All right. To what extent might Milei's electoral resilience be contingent upon exogenous political and financial scaffolding, particularly from Donald Trump and US Treasury? Could this episode signify the emergence of a transnational populist alliance that fuses neoliberal governance with nationalist rhetoric across hemispheres?
Okay, I think the answer to the first question is yes. It has helped Milei very clearly. It has moved Milei to the upper bound of the survey projections, and it is clear that the situation of the peso, the chances of devaluation, and so on, improved over the last week due to these commitments by the Trump administration. So it has helped. I don't know exactly how much, but it must have helped. And it reassured the people who perhaps had some doubts, but wanted to avoid the victory of Peronism and said, well, at the least, we have the support of the US, who is the major economic player, and And that means that the project can continue in this way for a time. So I think it has been important. In terms of the alliance, I am not so sure. Of course, there are some ideological affinities, personal affinities, political affinities. They are close to each other in some respects. But I'm not sure this is going to be so important in the future, in the sense that there are the interests of the U.S. government, the interests of the Argentinian government. The Argentinian government is dependent, of course, of the U.S. government, not the other way around. But in a situation in which the U.S. policymakers make a different evaluation in terms of their calculations, they can change. Also, in this case, by the way, people refer to the ideological proximity, but there are also some economic interests which may have played a role in this support. People close to the Trump political coalition, to the Trump government, had also some interests at stake in the devaluation, investments, and so on. So I would expect connections, some affinities, but I wouldn't overemphasize that. I think each government has its own interests, for sure.
Right. The US engineered bailout has been widely interpreted as politically instrumental rather than economically rational. How do such interventions reconfigure Argentine imaginaries of sovereignty, dependency, and anti-elitism, which have long underpinned populist mobilizations from Peronism to Milei's anarcho-capitalism?
Well, this is complex. On the one hand, I would say that this basically reinforces the interpretations that both Peronists and anti-Peronists have about the economic world. So in the case of people who are pro-market and export-oriented and anti-protectionist, who want to join the Argentine economy to world capitalism, this confirms that it is better to be associated with the economic powers in the world, with the US, with the US market. So it works fine in that respect. With regard to the ideological core of Kirchnerism and sociological and Peronism in the same way, because this shows that the Argentine government, this anti-Kirchnerist, anti-Peronist Argentine government, is just a puppet of the international capitalism. So it doesn't defend the Argentine economy and the Argentine society, and it puts Argentina in a situation of total dependency. In fact, they could make the point, and it was a strong point. This government has increased the debt of Argentina. We will not be able to pay it. This is just some reassurance for the short term, but in the end, we have very huge problems. We are in a mess. So in that sense, it reinforces everything. Perhaps in terms of the people who are doubtful, this is a little bit something favorable towards the right, because, well, in this case, they have saved us. Perhaps there are some advantages in being close to these people, and that may be a little similar to the Menem situation. So Menem changed Peronist policies, adopted a policy of to be very close to the United States, to international markets, privatizations, and so on. And for a while, it worked. And Menem won the 1995 elections. So it works fine in terms of the narratives, of the Argentine narratives. One has to wait for the end to see how this finishes. So let's see what happens in 1 year and a half. What will the situation be of the peso? The economy will be the economy in recession, no, etc.
Right. Given the severe austerity measures, deep welfare retrenchment, and widening inequality, how do you account for Milei's capacity to sustain an effective and symbolic identification with El Pueblo while advancing a project grounded in radical market orthodoxy?
Okay, I think I think he has been successful to solidify his coalition in order to win the Peronists and other and other contenders. I don't think this means that he can portray himself as the leader and representative of a unified Argentine people. I don't think that is possible. I think that anti-elite discourse, populist anti-elite discourse, had more credibility in the presidential elections to some extent. But right now, I think the situation is clear. He represents a coalition, a social coalition. It is a more middle class coalition. If you look at the electoral results by municipality, he has made much better. He has performed much better in districts where income is higher than in districts where income is lower. In contrast to Peronism, he has won. But the idea that I represent the people and Peronism represent the elite cannot work very well right now. Peronism is weak, but it represents many people, poor people, working class people, people who do not have informal jobs and so on. So I don't think it works so well in terms of the populist rhetoric. It works fine to win the election, but the idea of casta or just anti-elite, I don't think it works so well right now, actually.
Right. In your earlier work on ideological dimensions and special models of Latin American politics, you emphasize the structuring role of ideology in mediating citizen preferences. How does Milei's anarcho-capitalist imaginary, with its libertarian anti-statism and anti-political moralism, reconfigure Argentina's traditional ideological continuum between Peronist interventionism and neoliberal technocracy?
Okay, I think it is based, what he represents, it is based in that structure of ideological and programmatic confrontation. So he's not departing from that. He's transforming this a little in rhetorical terms, in terms also of the social coalition, but he's drawing his strength from this division. So in that sense, I don't think he's a radical transformer. I don't think he has changed the parameters of these conflicts that particularly, well, that have a long history in Argentina and solidified particularly under the Kirchner governments, in particular, well, Nestor Kirchner and also Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. So I don't think he has changed that drastically. He has given it a new flavor. He has emphasized the freedom that comes with the market. He has been able to appeal to young people who are outside of formal markets, self-employed people, young males. But I think he hasn't changed the ideological structuration of the Argentine party system. That's my impression. He has, in a way, intensified everything. So in a way, this could be present in the election that Macri won a similar way, but Macri was had a more moderate profile, and he was more of establishment politician in a way, or leader. Milei is disruptive, but this has also to do with the depth of the Argentine crisis and with the depth of the Argentine conflicts, actually.
Right. Can Milei's experiment be analytically classified as a form of neoliberal populism, or do its discursive, moral, and performative elements constitute a qualitatively distinct libertarian populist hybridity that challenges conventional typologies of populist economics?
Okay, I think he fits in the first label. I think so, but with a new level of intensity and with new rhetoric devices. But clearly it's pro-market, it's pro-export oriented, it is it's neoliberal in an extreme way, with a rhetoric which is much more extreme. So I don't think he departs from that, but he gives this frame, this libertarian flavor, this very ideological. He uses this economic obscure theoreticians from the Austrian school. He does these things. He speaks in a very vulgar way. He's rude. He's not respectful. He doesn't represent the elites, the cultural elites in that sense. But he's ingrained in the same, in my view, neoliberal populist approach. In a way, he's also close to Bolsonaro in some respects, I would say. So I don't think he's a total break with the past. By the way, this started before Milei, because in the Aníbal Fernández period, there were also some segments of the Argentine right who were moving in this direction very clearly.
Right. How does the Milei-Trump ideological affinity, which is a fusion of moral populism, economic deregulation, and cultural grievance, reflect broader transformations in the grammar of global right-wing populism, particularly its capacity to reconcile anti-establishment rhetoric with financial globalization?
I think he represents this trend in a way. He's an illustration of this trend, an extreme illustration, a very powerful in rhetoric terms instance. So I think he represents something clear and substantive in international terms. I also have the impression that not many, but some of these characteristics are very Argentine, very Argentinian. So let's see. I don't think that this ultra-liberal pro-financial markets, pro-export oriented, pro-dollarization approach works in other contexts so well for the radical right. So I don't expect something similar. I don't see something similar when we look at France, at Italy, at Germany, and focus on the radical right. In some of these respects, he's reflecting an Argentine situation. For instance, the tension between the export-oriented and social protection models, the importance of the dollarization process, the fact that Argentina is an economy where many Argentinians have thousands of millions of dollars, and they have different concerns. The need of the Argentine upper classes and upper middle classes to remain strongly connected to international economic markets in different ways, financially and in export product production. I think that's very Argentinian. So some elements are similar, pro-market, pro-market, some liberalism, anti-elites, anti-left, social order, ethics of work, discipline, crime and punishment, punitive policies. But in terms of the economic globalization, anti-taxes, by the way, anti-taxes, but in terms of economic globalization, I think there is something which is very typically Argentine.
Right. Peronism has historically embodied a polyvalent synthesis of populism, nationalism, and social justice. How is the Peronist opposition reconstructing its ideological and discursive identity in the face of Milei's anti-Peronist moral crusade and his attempt to redefine the people as entrepreneurial individuals rather than collective actors?
Yeah. A question. First of all, one has to say that Peronism is in the process of construction. It is deeply divided. There is not a clear national leadership. On the one hand, we have Cristina, Fernanda de Kirchner. On the other hand, there are other plausible leaderships. In particular, I understand Kicillof, the governor of the province of Buenos Aires. And there might be other people in Argentine Peronism, for sure, that might move in different directions, because Peronism is a very plastic, very flexible political creature. So we don't know exactly how it is going to evolve over the next couple of years. It's clear that it has to change, because it was the majoritarian force in Argentinian politics, and it has suffered a very humiliating defeat right now. Now, the analysis of why this has happened is very complex. I would say that they will have to stick to the idea of social justice, and they will have to reject many of the elements of the Milei platform. They don't have alternatives in that respect. Otherwise, they will lose the reason of being, because if they are going to defend entrepreneurship and individual economic freedom and so on, for that purpose, people already have Macri, Milei, Pro, Libertad Avanza, Lopez Murphy, etc. That is not possible. And they have to appeal also to trade unionists, to organized labor, to new social sectors that now are more Peronist than in the past, I would say, or that social sectors that are more Peronist, for instance, people who work at the universities, or are close to some elements of the Peronist platform. So they cannot change that dramatically, but they must find a new balance for sure. And that doesn't mean also that when the situation is mature, they don't win. They might win perfectly in the future in different elections. It depends on the economic performance of Milei, but it is also true that they must find also an economic platform to make national policy, and that is very difficult. Alberto Fernandez totally failed. He was split between different currents and tendencies, and he didn't find an economic balance. It is possible that somebody more pragmatic, let's think of, for instance, of Massa, something very pragmatic that might even be close to the center right in some respects, eventually wins, and this person maintains some elements of Peronism but moves in a more orthodox direction. That is possible, but one must keep in mind also that Argentine economics and politics are highly volatile. We have many experiences of very drastic changes, and Peronism has the structure and the network to build something new on that basis, I guess.
Right. In comparative perspective, do you discern substantive parallels between Milei's chainsaw politics and other neoliberal populist experiments in Latin America, such as Fujimori's authoritarian neoliberalism or Bolsonaro's reactionary anti-globalism? How do Argentina's institutional legacies and sociopolitical cleavages inflect these trajectories?
I think there are some shared elements. For instance, well, for sure with Bolsonaro, in terms of rhetoric, in terms of the direction, the economic direction, but so I think they share things for sure. Also with Fujimori in the attempts he made to change the Peruvian economic framework and the role of the state. On the other hand, I feel there are differences in some respects. One of them is that I think authoritarianism in Argentina, and this is just an intuition, so there is not an empirical evidence to sustain this very clearly for me now. Authoritarianism in Argentina is very weak, I would say so. It's very weak. So, I mean, even the project, the authoritarian project, must be very weak. In fact, I would say that despite all its excesses and problems and extra limitations, Milei hasn't made a step in the direction of building authoritarian institutions. And that may have to do with Argentine popular culture, which is, I would say, is very democratic. That may have to do with the intensity of the trauma of the last authoritarian experience, with the violence, the pain, the learning processes of Argentine society that said goodbye to authoritarianism in 1983. And perhaps also with the characteristics of the Argentine civil society and political society. So I don't think there is an authoritarian transformation in taking place right now, and I don't think that's very likely. Bolsonaro attempted to do this. He failed, but at least he attempted. I don't imagine Milei trying to do this. I'm not sure he's powerful in terms of the Argentine right structurally. The argument could be made that some social and economic sectors are using him, but they are not very strongly connected to him. Argentine right is plural. There are other people acting there. So I don't see this is going to happen.
Right. Based on your long-standing research on party systems dynamics and ideological structuring in Latin America, does Milei's ascent represent a critical juncture in Argentina's cleavage structure, a durable reconfiguration of the left, right, and populist technocratic axis, or rather a cyclical populist insurgency within an enduring Peronist framework?
I would go for the second interpretation. So it's a modification, it is an intensification, there are significant changes, but the underlying structure is there. And in that respect, my impression is that Macri's victory was more important, because until Macri, you had the Peronists and radicals. So Alfonsín radical, then Peronists, then Menem, then De la Rúa was a radical, although he had a big coalition, but it was a very plural coalition. And then again, the Peronists. And in the case of Macri, you had already a center-right coalition. It was not radicalism. It was a new actor. And it was an actor which was very strongly pro-business, pro-market, and so on. So I think Macri made a more important and enduring change, and Milei has intensified this in a way, with a new rhetoric, a new style, representing something new. But the structure of pro-market, pro-export-oriented versus protectionist social expenditure, inflationary, with the risk of inflationary policies, represented by Peronism, is there. I don't think he has changed that, actually.
Right. How might we interpret the performative and aesthetic dimensions of Milei's leadership, such as his rock star persona, symbolic aggression, and social media theatrics, as mechanisms of discursive populist construction, mobilizing effective resonance in a post-institutional political environment?
Yes, I think they are populist elements, populist styles, and changes in that direction. I don't have any doubt about it. I would say that these elements are more powerful and are more usually selected for politicians who are outside of power. So they made much more sense and were more powerful, I think, in electoral terms when Milei was an outsider contending for the presidency. Right now, I have doubts they add so much to his success, and the credibility of these elements tends to erode as we are in the face of a president who has been there 2, 3, or 4 years. So I don't think this is going to add so much in the next presidential elections. He represents a different style, but it is not so credible, I guess. Now, the economic alternatives are clear, and I think that's what led to the triumph of Milei. Not so much that he gave a concert saying "I'm the lion" and so on. That's my impression. And who knows? Perhaps in 2 years we will have a Peronist who will have a very disruptive style. It is possible. By the way, in Argentinian politics, Peronists are disruptive in style, and the right and the radicals are establishment. Milei has changed that, but Menem was a disruptor, somebody who represented something new in style. Cristina Fernández de Kirchner also, in the way he speaks, in the way she mobilized. Evita Perón in the past. So Peronism has a long tradition in that respect. And it is interesting that Milei took it and changed it in a different way, of course.
And the final question is, looking forward, do you foresee a durable transformation of Argentina's political field toward the libertarian populist realignment, or will economic contradictions, institutional inertia, and popular backlash catalyze the reemergence of a renewed progressive or Peronist counter-populism capable of reclaiming the people from the right?
Well, a very ambitious question. We cannot predict the future for sure. Many things can happen. We could also imagine that Milei is successful. It's a possibility that the macroeconomic starts working in the Chilean way in the future. That's a possibility. We don't know. But if I had to make a bet, I would say that this libertarian coalition will face also strong economic problems. I'm saying that not on the basis of any future anticipation, but on the basis of previous experiences. So this might be wrong, but recent experiences since I don't know, the 1970s teach us that it is very difficult for very complex economic and social reasons, and that's why Argentine economists say it is very difficult to find a virtuous balance, a virtuous cycle in Argentine economics, and that sooner or later governments face imbalances, bottlenecks that lead to a strong reconfiguration. So I would expect, I'm not sure if in 2 years or in 4 years, a crucial change and oscillation. And I would assume that Peronism will play a key role in that change, that it will be able to lead a different coalition, and that coalition will have to represent something wide apart from Milei's policies. Will they make in the end the same policies as Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner or Nestor Kirchner? Probably not. Probably they will have to find a different policy. But I would expect a change in the next 2 to 4 years in Argentinian economic policy and so on.
Okay. Ivan, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. It was my pleasure.